Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to my channel. My name is Kylie if you're new, and this here is my dad, Matt.
Hello everyone.
So today we are finally going to be discussing the TV show Hannibal. I know I've talked about it in several videos in the past that I would be making a video, and here we finally are. So if you haven't heard of Hannibal, this show came out in 2013. It's rated at a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it was airing on NBC. But if you don't know what happened in Hannibal, here it is. Gifted criminal profiler Will Graham has a unique way of thinking that allows him to empathize with anyone, including psychopaths. But while helping the FBI pursue a particularly complicated serial killer, he decides he could use some help and enlists the brilliant psychiatrist Hannibal Lecter. The two form a partnership, and it seems that there is no villain they can't catch together, but Lecter harbors a dark secret. His own brilliant mind has gone to the dark side, and he has more in common with the criminals they hunt than Will could possibly imagine. So this stars Lawrence Fishburne, Mads Mikkelsen, and Hugh Dancy, some very high-profile actors, as well as Gillian Anderson. So we are going to talk about a lot of spoiler-free stuff first, and then the latter half of this video we will get into a bunch of spoilers and talk about the characters more in depth, but right now I'm going to open it up to my dad, and I want to ask you about your experience watching this show, because we'll get into it. It's very gory. It's the most horrific TV show I think I've ever seen, and that includes American Horror Story. So what was your experience like watching this show?
Well, I was doing some research before we filmed this, and I found an article that said exactly what I said to you in the first episode or two of the show. How could this be on network TV? Doing some research on it, I found out that it was originally done by a French TV network, and NBC got it for a song, so to speak, for very little money, and they decided to license it and throw it onto NBC, which with every episode I continued to say to Kylie, I cannot believe this is network type TV. Not only from the just beyond any thought process that I've ever had in thinking of a horror movie and how gross, off the charts something could be, and yet here it was on NBC for 3 seasons. The only thing missing was, because this show was not on Netflix or Amazon or HBO, there was no swearing and no nudity. But when it came to the imagination, and as far as cannibalism, grossness, ways to kill people, how to arrange them and things like that, the show was off the charts.
I can't stress to you enough how psychologically disturbing this was as well. It's not just the gore, it's unfathomable, I guess, is what we're both trying to say.
And gore is an interesting word. Some people would call it gore, but it's so nuanced, it's so artful, it's so innovative, it's so off the charts that it's not the kind of gore that people are honestly thinking of in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? It's just, it's the most unique thing that I've ever seen done in a horror movie or a movie about a killer or a serial killer. Yeah,
so we're going to get into a bunch of that in our spoiler part of this video, because we are going to talk about some of our favorite gore, I guess. I don't really know. Our favorite
crazy stuff.
I'd rather call it our favorite art installations from this show, because I feel like oftentimes we forget that an artist really crafted all of this and crafted and painted the blood and did all of this stuff. So we can't forget that this really is art, so we will be talking about that more in depth a little bit later. But my general review of this show is, I'm just going to say it right now, this is my favorite horror TV show I have ever seen, including American Horror Story, including Creepshow. It's unmatched. The level of art and the time and creativity that went into this show, and how much love and passion went into it, and the performances of these high-profile actors that they somehow got into this TV show, it's immaculate. So I want to briefly discuss why Will Graham was chosen as the lead of this show instead of Clarice Starling. Partly was because they couldn't get the rights to the character Clarice Starling, but see, I feel like we need to make a completely different video that's comparing the characters of this show to the characters of the movies, so we're just going to talk about this kind of briefly. But how did you feel about Will Graham in this show versus Clarice Starling as the lead interacting with Hannibal?
Well, it's hard to compare them because we saw 39 episodes of Hannibal from 3 seasons, and trying to compare 2 movies with 2 different actresses playing that role, one of whom won an Academy Award, is pretty difficult to do. We got to know these characters through these 3 seasons like family, basically. We really got to know these people, and in a movie it's just different. I thought it was interesting, and I never did think about the fact that Clarice Starling was not involved in this series. And when I was reading, I found out that MGM owns the right to the character, and supposedly CBS is working on a series revolving around Clarice Starling that will not have Hannibal Lecter in it. I don't know if you read that, but yeah, that's supposedly on the board right now. And there were a couple other characters from Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal Rises that were also not part of this TV show because they're still intellectual property from MGM, who would not give them up, because I guess they had it in their mind that they could sell another part of the 2 movies. 3 movies. Red Dragon's actually the 3rd movie in this series, which we will probably mention at the end of this podcast, because when we did the original one, when we talked about the first 2 movies, we didn't realize there was a 3rd one, and we did watch it after we finished the TV series.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not our fault. No one ever really talks about the 3rd one, and the first 2, The Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal, are both on Netflix, and The Red Dragon is just kind of nowhere to be found, and then we randomly stumbled upon it on Amazon Prime. That also has very high-profile actors in it. That's a good movie. Yep. I don't know why we didn't know of its existence, but I digress. So I'm going to read you a couple quotes from an article I found from Screen Rant, and it kind of talks about the difference between Will Graham and Clarice Starling, so I'm just going to kind of read off the quotes and see to what extent you agree, or just whatever you think about it. Clarice Starling is an FBI agent who is training under Special Agent Jack Crawford. When she meets Dr. Lecter, her intention is to get insight on serial killers from an inside perspective, and when they meet, he is already imprisoned. This relationship immediately puts her at a disadvantage with Will Graham, who meets Lecter outside of jail before he's been caught. In a sense, Hannibal preys on Graham differently than he did Clarice, but this is partially because he's free and actively killing when they meet. It's the difference between a caged predator and a free one at the height of his ability. So would you agree that Will has a more intimate relationship with Lecter than Clarice? Because I feel like it's arguable, because we got 2 movies with Clarice and Hannibal, and their relationship got very close, but then obviously Will has 39 episodes, so what's your thought on their relationships?
The relationship between Hannibal Lecter and Will Graham went further than most TV shows are able to go in developing a relationship. This is the most complex relationship that I can ever remember following, whether it's in some type of TV show, streaming, or a movie, to be quite honest, between 2 men based on an incredibly bizarre, macabre premise, and yet it's super deep. And I read a couple of opinion pieces after we watched the TV show, and they talk a lot about the relationship between the 2 of these men and where it ends up by the end of the 3 seasons.
Yeah, so even if you enjoy horror more for the storyline or the more nuanced scares and stuff and not just the gore, or even if you don't like horror, anyone in their right mind would be highly fascinated by the relationship between Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more when we get into spoilers, but I do have one more quote. So, because Will has seen the true capabilities of Hannibal firsthand, worked alongside him, been tormented by him mentally and physically, and also seems to still love him in a way that has implied to be more than platonic, his dynamic with Hannibal is so much more varied and intriguing in Hannibal than what he had with Clarice. So do you find their relationship to be more intriguing? We kind of...
Oh yeah, by a mile.
Yeah, okay. It's hard to say because they're just so different, and their relationships are so iconic in very different ways, and I'll probably say that multiple times throughout this video. It's hard to compare them because while they are similar and basically telling the same story, they are so incredibly different. So before we get into the spoilers and comparing Anthony Hopkins to Mads Mikkelsen's Mads Mikkelsen?
Yeah.
Okay, Mads Mikkelsen. Before we get into that, I want to talk about why this show was canceled, and essentially it was just why any TV show gets canceled prematurely, and it was its low ratings, because they started out rather low and then gradually got worse until they were canceled. So I wanted to ask you why you thought it had low ratings.
I don't think network TV was the right place for it. In today's world, anybody under 40 probably doesn't watch a lot of network television, and if they're not streaming only nowadays, cord cutters, it's probably usually just so that they can watch sports if they happen to be sports fans. So I think it was just hidden in a spot that the type of people that are watching network TV today were not going to partake of this. This was HBO, this was Netflix, this was Amazon Prime. This was not NBC, ABC, CBS stuff.
But the producer, Brad Fuller, he actually thinks that there is potential for them to pick up a season 4 now that it's on Netflix, because he feels like now the show has found its true place. Netflix is absolutely the place for this show.
Yeah.
Definitely has the fan base for it. I feel like the reason it was rated so low was probably one, because of the gore, because most normal people aren't gonna watch this show. They're not gonna be able to handle this show psychologically. It also definitely had an art house vibe. I would compare it to Hereditary or Midsommar, Vivarium, just kind of art house type of movies, although it doesn't have the slow burn sort of quality to it that most art house movies do, but it is very artistic, like I mentioned earlier, and that's just not for everybody, unfortunately. Not everyone has the same appreciation, because
this is a complex piece of storytelling and art is what it is.
Yeah, and not everyone really wants to take the time to break things down in their mind. They just kind of want to enjoy the show as entertainment rather than, you know, thinking about all the implications and stuff like that.
One of the other things that Murray said, the producer, he didn't want to go down the slippery slope of having a lot of this be about sex crimes and rape and things like that. In this entire series of 39 episodes, they don't have rape in this show. There is no overt sexuality in the crimes. Not overt. There's deeper things we can go into later, and plus you'll just have to see it for yourself if you haven't seen it. But I thought that was interesting. In this show, they were comparing it to CSI Special Crimes or something, where it's all about sexual assault, and it's a show that's been on network TV for 17 years or something. And the producer was saying he purposely did not want to do that, and so it doesn't go that way. It makes it more work, I think, to come up with continually creative killings, serial killer motives.
Yeah, I feel like the whole sexual assault thing, it's so tired. I'm tired of violence against women and that constantly being portrayed, because that's not the world that I want to live in, to be honest. So this show is so creative in the motivations that it finds for its killers.
Yeah.
It's so creative. I'm gonna say that so many times. Anyways, now I want to talk about psychology a little bit and why people deem themselves as fanibals, people that are so obsessed with this show. I think it's fair to say that we are fanibals. We love this show.
Yeah.
So on Psychology Today, I found a piece that was about why we love horror movies and why we love such morbid stuff. And Carl Jung made an argument for adults, and he maintains that our mental health depends on our shadow, that part of our psyche that harbors our darkest energies, such as melancholia and murderousness. The more we repress the morbid, the more it foments neuroses or psychoses. To achieve wholeness, we must acknowledge our most demonic inclinations. So how do you feel about the fact that you have inner demons that you address via watching Hannibal?
I never thought about it that way before, but obviously there was something about the levels that this show went to that I found very interesting. Now, I will say, if it were not for the quality of the cinematography, the actors, the music, all things that we talked about continuously through all 3 seasons, I don't think I would have watched this. Even with Kylie home and me seeing things like this for the first time. But this was so well done. I mean, the soundtrack alone, if you pay attention to it, you say, well, this isn't like anything on television. The acting overall is not anything in network television. Now, it wouldn't have been interesting enough for me if it wasn't so well done.
Exactly. I'll say it's comparable to The Outsider, which is on HBO. We watched that when we did a free trial. So we watched The Outsider. It's definitely comparable to that. That's an excellent horror show as well.
Good comparison.
Yeah, I should have mentioned that earlier. I mean, in regards to the psychology stuff, I'm pretty in tune with my darker side, as are most horror fans. You know, it's kind of fun, it's kind of nice to just be able to live vicariously through characters and whatnot and never have to deal with any of that in real life, especially if you are someone that experiences anxiety, because once you witness a character's story and you realize that you have it quite a lot better than any characters in any horror movie you've seen, sometimes anxiety can become a little bit more manageable in that way.
Will Graham is a tortured soul through 3 seasons, through 39 episodes. Part of the running theme throughout this is Will Graham is tortured. He's the star of this show. This show is really about him in more ways than one. I just kept feeling sorry for him. You see the things that he experienced during the course of this show for his personal life and in combination with his job, and you think, wow, my life is really simple.
Yep. I have never seen a more tortured character, because there are plenty of movies and such where your character experiences hardships, gets down in the dirt, whatever. I promise you none will compare to that of what Will Graham goes through. And I'm gonna leave it at that because we'll talk about some more stuff in spoilers. But so we are about to get into spoilers, but I briefly, keyword briefly, because I feel like this could be a whole video in and of itself, but I want to compare the performance of Anthony Hopkins to the performance of Mads Mikkelsen as Hannibal Lecter. So do you want to kick it off, or do you want me to?
I will kick it off because I said to you at some point while we were watching this series, and we said it on our podcast together, and it's been said by probably millions of people, you can't imagine anybody playing Hannibal Lecter except for Anthony Hopkins. We said it when we did a review earlier this summer, but at one point while Kylie and I were watching this together, I said, this guy for this show playing Hannibal Lecter is off the charts. He's a Danish actor. He's been a Bond villain. He's recognizable. I think a lot of people that will go to see this, hopefully, and I'll be very interested to see the comments that Kylie gets eventually over time for those of you that do pick this up. It came on Netflix starting on June 5th, so that's why all of a sudden, people are starting to see it and all that. He's just fantastic.
Yeah. Fantastico. Okay. Yes, I'm gonna try to keep this short, but they are both so iconic, but in very different ways.
Such different ways.
And I want to argue that they're kind of playing different characters, because Hannibal in, the Hannibal TV show, Mads Mikkelsen plays a younger Hannibal, and Anthony Hopkins plays a slightly older one that's been imprisoned for quite a while.
Yeah.
So they're different characters, having been through very different things. Mads Mikkelsen is the Hannibal in his prime, during his biggest major killing spree, and then Anthony Hopkins obviously in jail and then escaping and all that good stuff. So they're very different characters, and because they play Hannibal at such different times in his life, I think it's perfectly fair to call them both iconic and to really appreciate both of them in this role. And now I will say that I don't think anyone will ever embody the essence of Hannibal the way that Anthony Hopkins did, but that doesn't mean that I don't seriously appreciate Mads Mikkelsen's performance, because he was perfect. I wouldn't have cast anybody else as Hannibal in the TV show.
It's hard to imagine anybody else playing it in this NBC show, but they do share the same thing. They both do look down on what they think of as just normal humanity. They don't have respect for normal humans. Part of the reason that they're cannibals and killers. They just don't think much of people. They feel particularly indifferent, but in the TV series, he feels godlike. There's a lot of talk about God and religion in the TV series. He thinks of himself as, in my opinion, as a deity level type of person, but Will Graham is the one person that he has run across that he really is interested in and falls for in many different ways throughout the course of the TV series.
Yeah, and I think it's because Will Graham matches his genius, and because Will Graham is empathetic to the point where he can perfectly envision exactly how someone murdered people, etc., and get into psychopaths' minds. It's the way that Will Graham is probably the first person ever to be able to understand Hannibal.
Yeah, that's I agree with you.
Yeah. So we're about to get into spoilers. I know I just said that was the last thing we were going to talk about, but I think that we should do some general just opinions about the show and our last recommendations before we get into spoilers. So, do you want to kick that off?
No.
Okay. Oh.
I wasn't ready for that.
Okay, I guess I don't have anything to say that I haven't already said. This is my favorite horror TV show. The cast of this show is really unmatched in anything else that I've seen, really. Just the performances are immaculate. The art installations of this show are just beyond beautiful, especially if you appreciate gore and stuff like that. So
as I said earlier, the soundtrack is like a soundtrack from a movie. I mean, it's live orchestra. The cinematography is just incredible. I mean, I know we sound like we're going over the top, but this show really hit us like that, both of us. We want you all to see this. If you're watching Kylie's podcast you're going to want to see this. I'm just saying, you are going to want to see this. This is a sleeper. It was funny, I was talking to my brother a couple weeks ago who's 12 years younger than me, and I was telling him about this TV show that Kylie and I watch, but you got to be really weird to watch it. And then he says, well, I watched it. So he watched all 3 seasons of it, and so there's lots of people out there, but not enough on network TV, and I think this is going to be one of the most highly rated things on Netflix this year.
Definitely. And I hope they don't take it off, and I hope that Netflix picks up the 4th
Yeah,
season.
4th season, please.
So now we're going to get into spoilers, so if you haven't seen it, I recommend clicking off because you'll want to be surprised by this TV show. You're going to want all the shocks. You're not going to want to watch these spoilers, so watch it first and then come back to this video if you so please. First, we have to talk about the art in this show, and so we're going to take turns talking about some of our favorite killers or like our favorite crime scenes and stuff like that. So do you want to start or do you want me to start?
A large theme of this movie, besides the relationship between Will Graham and Hannibal Lecter and Will Graham's tortured life and what's going on in his brain and all of that, is the way that the people that are killed in this film are arranged like pieces of art. So I'll let you talk about the first one that you want to bring up.
Okay.
We did not match this up, so we'll see how many different ones we come up with, because there's 39 of them.
Well,
kind of.
Not quite, but there are a lot. There are a lot.
Close.
Okay, so the first one I want to talk about is the mushroom garden.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember? Okay, so for those of you that have seen it, I'll probably put in some clips and stuff, but they find these bodies, and these people are all diabetic, and this killer was a pharmacist, and he found out they were diabetic. He put these people into a sugar coma, essentially, and then turned them, while they were still alive in a coma, turned them into a mushroom garden because he liked growing mushrooms. So if you haven't seen this show and you just want to live vicariously through us and you're hearing this, trust me, they get even crazier.
Yeah, I mean, that was in the first 3 episodes, I think. And the art of this is when they find location where the bodies are buried, multiple bodies. It's like a mushroom garden.
Yeah.
And it's got IVs that are going down into these people that are buried, that are in these comatose states, and there's mushrooms growing out of it. It's one of the grossest concepts I'd ever come across. And then it just kept going from there.
So, okay, the grossest part of any scene in that episode was definitely, it was when they were inspecting the crime scene, and one of the investigators was peeling some of the mushrooms off this person's face, and you could clearly see all their jaw, their whole skeleton of their mouth, and then they wake up.
Yeah, they wake up. That was a scare.
So, do you want to go ahead and tell the next one?
Yeah, the human totem pole.
That was one of mine for sure.
The human totem pole. When they show up, it's on the beach. This person has taken,
I think 13 bodies or something?
13 bodies and made them into a human totem pole. Unbelievably stunning.
Yeah, and it's just wild because not only in the context of the show, but in the context of real life, that a sculptor really had to use fake body parts and actually build this thing. And that's what I'm saying. The art in this show is just, it's incredible. And I've never seen a sculpture, I've never seen an art piece like that before.
No.
Obviously.
And I hope I never do.
Obviously. But yeah, just crazy, insane art pieces. That was one of my favorites as well.
Not for the faint of heart.
Nope. Okay, so my next one is the person that was propped up like a cello with the vocal cords being used as the cello strings.
Oh my gosh.
If I ever get monetized, there's no way this one will still stay monetized.
No way.
But I have to show it because I appreciate it. Like,
it's just beyond the belief. He's become like a human cello.
Which is disgusting because I learned a lot during that episode. I never knew that cat intestines were popularly used for string instruments. I didn't know that. That's horrifying and terrible. I always thought it was just horsehair or something like that. Anyways, so yeah, someone gets their throat ripped open and then someone uses their vocal cords to play them like a human cello.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. They're half human, half cello.
The creativity, really. Okay, so next one.
Well, speaking of creativity, there was a scene when they go into the courtroom in one of the episodes. Somebody was angry with the judge. The judge ends up, they walk into the courtroom and they've made the judge into like the statue that shows justice and not with the scales of justice.
Yeah, I'm just looking it up because I need to.
It was the scales of justice.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so he's holding, I think it looks like it's his heart and his brain, his head is
That's what it is.
Yeah, and he's all chained
brain
up.
And heart in the scales of justice.
Oh my gosh.
And then the judge, it was a man, the judge is in the middle of it, and he's completely made into artwork.
Basically all of the crime scenes have something that is just so unique and original to them that they're just so unexpected, you know? I mean, well, if you're watching the spoilers, you know this, never mind. Is it my turn?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so this isn't one of the crime scenes, but the presentation of the food that Hannibal makes is so gorgeous. And I didn't do any research on this, but they must have gotten some of the top chefs in the world and whatever to craft.
I did.
Oh, you did?
Yeah,
Okay.
They have a celebrity chef.
Oh.
And I can even tell you the name of the celebrity chef. And we did talk about this during the series while we were watching it. I'll have to go back and find it. But there's a celebrity chef that does all 3 series, I believe. There are multiple meals in most every single episode. So Hannibal, besides being a forensic psychologist at this point, who used to be a surgeon who can be just about anything he wants by the time you're finished with this thing, but he is a gourmand. And they make the art of presentation and the art of making the presentation into this sensuous, over-the-top.
Well, the food itself is essentially an art installation.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like food. Well, it looks like food, but it's the
amazing.
the most gorgeous food you'll ever see. So it's disgusting because most of it's human meat, but it's just so gorgeous. And so that was my final favorite thing that I listed. But I think you had a couple more.
I'm going to quote from an article from The Ringer by Allison Herman, and she says, "Speaking of food," with an exclamation mark, "every episode of Hannibal is named for a term from French, Japanese, or Italian cuisine, depending on the season. Superstar chef Jose Andre served as a culinary consultant, and it's easy to see the results in the prodigious efforts of food stylist Janice Poon in the elaborate meals Hannibal prepares for his guests, all closer to sculpture than sustenance."
Yeah.
And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We cannot tell you enough about the artfulness of the people that have been killed in this show and the artfulness of the gourmand in Hannibal and the meals. You have to see it to believe it.
Okay, so now that we're in our spoiler section, I want to go back to the relationship between Will Graham and Hannibal, because Hannibal was a really hard character for me. A lot of the times I was kind of rooting against him because he obviously did some really horribly sickening things, but at the end of the day, I still rooted for him, and it's so hard to comprehend why, so I just wanted you to talk about,
I know,
with some spoilers and whatnot, their relationship and how you feel about Hannibal regarding some of the stuff that he did, maybe. So just whatever you want to talk about with that.
Yeah, it's hard to say that you're rooting for a serial killer, and it's definitely one of those movies or TV shows that you go up and down rooting for the person you know you're really not supposed to root for. At least you don't think so. Now, the screenwriter or the person who wrote the original novel, they probably do want you to feel that way. But he was so curious about Will Graham from the beginning, and I think he was trying to find the first true relationship of his entire life. Because of that, he would let down his guard. At some point, he says that Will has given him up. He's not on his side. He says, "I let you see the real me." He was so classy and so interesting, and he was the ultimate Renaissance man, and was hard to hate him because he was so interesting and because he kept trying in his own way to help Will while he's also hurting Will.
It's very confusing.
Very confusing. I mean, really, let's be honest. We still don't know, with the cliffhanger ending of the 3rd season, we still don't really know, which was the intention when I read some opinion pieces. I mean, that's the intention of it.
Yeah, and it's frustrating. So I have basically the exact same reasoning as you, because he tried to kill, he almost killed Jack and Will. He did kill Abby. He did kill Beverly, which was so upsetting to me. He shoved an ear down Will's stomach, and yet the fact that he is just the most fascinating character that I've ever witnessed, I think is why I still cared for him, I guess, and was kind of rooting for him. It's very confusing. He's like an anti-hero, basically. Sometimes he does good.
But if anybody used to see the Dos Equis commercials with the most interesting man in the world, Hannibal in this TV show, he's the most interesting man in the world.
Exactly.
He knows something about everything, and he plays these elaborate instruments, and he can write music, and you name it, he can do it.
Yeah, and even the fact that when he goes to prison and everything, and he's in high security, and he's not in control of his situation, he's still in control of his situation. He chose to go to jail. He chose to get caught because he came back to the US with Will. He's in control of everything and everyone. And so I forgot to mention this in the spoiler-free version, but also just the way that he speaks. It's so hypnotic.
Yeah, that's right.
And a lot of the dialogue is also extremely poetic, and I wouldn't know what the hell they were talking about unless we had the subtitles on, and I could also read it at the same time as I was listening to it so that I could fully process it, because it's gorgeous. The way that they talk, the way he talks, it's gorgeous.
And we haven't even touched upon the fact that Dr. Alana Bloom was a student in college of Hannibal Lecter, who shows up as one of the profilers at the FBI, who from the beginning of the first episode of the first season seems to like Will. You can't really tell. And the relationship that ends up happening throughout this film, throughout this TV show, this is the first time we've done a TV show, the relationship Alana Bloom ends up being in a three-way situation in many different ways with Hannibal Lecter and with Will Graham that makes things even more complicated. There are so many things to talk about. You said it before we started, it could be a 9-hour YouTube video, but
this could, I mean, I've been considering actually doing an entire series kind of on Hannibal Lecter and Silence of the Lambs, the books, the TV show, talking about the characters, comparing them to the movies. There's a whole lot, so if you're still watching this video, if you're still here, comment down below and let me know if that's something you'd be interested in, because I'm sure it's something we could definitely explore. But on that note, we're just about to wrap it up, but I was going to ask if there were any other characters that you wanted to talk about before we finish that you wanted to get in here.
The last character in the second season who was also trying to be a serial killer was the Tooth Fairy.
The guy was weird. That was something else. I'd love to compare the TV show's Tooth Fairy to the one in the movie, because he was played by Lord Voldemort, if you didn't know that. And so there's so much to talk about, but we've already been recording for over 15 minutes? I don't know. There's too much. There's simply too much to talk about, so I feel like this would be a good series to start on my channel. I'm already in the middle of my Halloween series. I just recently finished my Friday the 13th series. Unless you guys would like more Friday themed videos, comment down below. So this would be a good new one to start potentially, but just let me know. So in terms of characters, I just want to bring up really briefly before we end, because I have to mention them. They deserve it. Gillian Anderson, who plays Bedelia, Hannibal Lecter's psychiatrist. Amazing. Gillian Anderson killing it in this role. And Hugh Dancy as Will Graham. Yeah.
Enough said. Lawrence Fishburne is great too.
Oh, he's amazing.
The fact that they scored him for 3 seasons shows how much fun I think he was probably having doing this TV show, because Lawrence Fishburne could do just about anything he wants. He was one of the 5 main characters for 3 seasons.
Yeah, I just didn't bring him up because I don't feel like he was playing a character that was anything outside the realm he could do or would do or whatever. It wasn't anything crazy or whatever. He was an FBI agent, you know. Very briefly before we end, so the very last scene, the final end credit scene of season 3, when Bedelia is sitting at the dinner table, she's missing a leg and there is a cooked leg on the table. So I didn't look any theories up, I probably should have, but one of mine was that perhaps spending so much time with Lecter and spending so much time dissecting him and being kidnapped and held hostage by him, that maybe she wanted to see what it was all about, but she couldn't kill somebody, so she decided to eat her own leg. I don't know. Or, plot twist, Hannibal is somehow still alive and she was at the dinner table and waiting for him to join her or something. I don't know. Do you have any theories?
No, I don't know. But because of the characters she played in the series, it made sense, and it's weird way.
It did, but it was also really infuriating because we had no more content to watch after that, and we're just like, okay, we just end with Bedelia about to eat her own leg? Alright, okay.
At least that's what we think.
I don't, but she was
hard to tell.
She was missing a leg, and there was a cooked leg on the table. Okay, so any closing statements before we wrap this up?
Watch these 3 seasons. Let Kylie know what you think about them. I've been curious since we started watching this to see what other people think about it. I'm not big on searching on the internet, so maybe eventually Kylie's leaving for a while now. I'm not going to get to do any videos with her for a while. Maybe I will do a little more research because I'm just curious to see what other people thought about this, because I thought it was so groundbreaking, especially because it was on network TV. That's the other thing you have to keep in mind. It's just unbelievable that this was on NBC. Just unbelievable. And I hope very much that Netflix decides to do a 4th season, because we couldn't get enough. It was the most that I had ever crammed in. 37 episodes over 39 over
2 weeks?
2 weeks probably.
Yeah.
And I don't do a lot of that. There were times where she had to stop me before I said, let's watch one more. Because it just seemed like one show after the other. You'd think, well, how can they beat that?
And people are certainly talking about it now because it's on Netflix, and people are like, how did I never see this before? But not everybody is talking about it. I think it was number 3 for a little while on Netflix. But if this show had been made today, it would be all anyone could talk about, honestly. And like, not even just in the horror community. It would have a much wider
Yeah, Kylie was asking me about that earlier. If that had been released on HBO, it would have been a hit.
Yeah.
I'm just, because it's the quality of work they do on HBO. Now, a lot of people, of course, would never be able to watch this.
No, but a lot of people will, and I think that there is definitely something in this for everybody. Well, not everybody, but for a lot of people, there is so much to appreciate about this show. I know I said earlier that we would love if Netflix picked it up, but now that I'm thinking about it, HBO should definitely be the one to take it over, even though it's streaming on Netflix right now. We'll see, but ultimately, just as long as they can get roughly the same team of people to work on it, I'll fall in love with it all over again. I know I will. That's about it. So is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm gonna stop myself. I keep going on about this particular one.
Literally, we could talk about it for so long. So we're just gonna stop now, but let us know if you want another video. I post to this channel 3 days a week on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 5 o'clock p.m. and then one more video on my vlog channel. So 4 new videos a week, that's a lot of content. You can follow me on social media, Instagram and Twitter at Kai Johns. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I'm sorry you have to say goodbye to my dad, Matt. I will be going away for my last semester of college in the next week or so, so that's insane. There's no stability in my life right now. It's a weird time. But anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this video.
Are you saying I'm unstable?
No. Bye.
Bye.